Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we have a first on the YouTube channel. We're going to have a go at a bit of still life. We're going to paint a lovely bone china cup and saucer. So grab your paints and let's get started. I've given myself a bit of space to begin with because we're going to do some simple drawing to get our teacup ready. So I love using a set square which gives me a right angle because I can draw myself then a line for the baseline and a vertical from which to base my painting. So what I like to do is I'll find sort of where the top edge of my teacup rim is going to be, and then I will measure from both sides out. So I think I'll do 3 centimeters to the edge, and then I know I can do 3 centimeters to the edge there, and then that allows me to draw a nice curve that I know that will be at least roughly nice and even. It's funny, drawing a curve is always quite a challenge. You can always do one way really nicely and then the other side just requires a bit more sketching, but that's cool. So that's going to be the top of our teacup, and then working my way downwards, I think I'm going to have the base of it there, and maybe that will be about 2 centimeters, so I can mark on my line there, and then I will come in there, and as always one side is so much easier than the other. Lovely. And then I think actually what I'm going to do is bring it in even further. Give myself that curve and then have a little foot coming off the base. So you can see without my ruler I've gone all wonky, so let's see. That's quite nice on that side. It's about 1.8. So we'll get to 1.8 there, and you can see, gosh, I'm really far off. And then as I get further down, my curves are going to just be a little bit rounder because the viewing point, the eye, is looking down a little bit. Okay, so there's my cup, and I'm going to put in a handle, and I'm just going to sketch in one like that, and then I can just make it a bit fancier. So I've decided to paint a cup inspired by the Royal Collection, which is pretty fancy. So yeah, we're going to be looking at colours featured in the Royal Collection china. Now I'm going to put in the saucer, so I'm going to use that as my midpoint for the widest part of the saucer, and I think I'll do 5.5 centimeters. And then this is the biggest challenge, I think, trying to get a nice curve. It's not too bad, but the nice thing is once you've done your first curve you can then kind of even it up and things. And just track it over the other side. And that's a really nice starting point for our drawing. So let's get the paints in and get ready to paint. I've got all my paints ready, but there is one more thing to think about, and that's the pattern, the decoration. And this central line is still massively helpful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in a bit of a curly border for my cup on one side, and I'm going to have some flowers in the middle, and then a little sort of like a fleur-de-lis kind of shape, but just some curls and some flourishes. And the beauty of having a central line is then that's really helpful in trying to mirror it up. So I'm just going to finish drawing in a pattern for the side, and then of course we'll want something similar for the base. I've got a nice simple pattern, and I'm going to start a bit of Cobalt Turquoise on the background areas, and I'm going to use a size 2 brush, and I just want this nice and diluted, and we're going to look at how we can create roundness and shape with just a single colour. So I'm going to begin by painting in a colour just here, and I've just been cleaning my brush off and adding water, no more colour, to this whole section. And of course bone china has a beautiful shine on it, so we'll also be looking at places where we may just leave a tiny bit completely unpainted and pale. So I am just using an absolute minimal amount of colour to fill this in to start off with. And just around here we're just going to leave a tiny bit unpainted to get a nice bit of shine. Now, of course, to create a bit of roundness, what we can do is make the edges just that little bit more intense and dark in colour. So I'm going to take a even smaller brush, a size 2, a slightly more concentrated amount of colour on my brush, and I am going to just capture the edge on the curves there, and just by cleaning my brush off, I'm going to draw that in a little bit. Because I'm using quite a minimal amount of colour and water, it means that the likelihood is this cup will have already dried by the time I'm adding this colour, but that's fine. We just clean the brush off and we can smooth it and blend it, and just here I'm just trying to sort of create a bit of a contrast to get a little bit of unpainted space and shine on that highly polished cup. So I'm just going to paint in the same colour using the same technique down there. Whilst I wait for that to dry, I'm going to paint in some pretty pink roses and some other flowers that we've got featured as a repetitive pattern around the cup. So I've got my size 4/10 brush and got permanent rose, and I am going to paint in some little roses. This one's sort of come down on an angle, so that's just curling down out there. Then we've got one a little bit more open faced. If you are keen to actually learn a bit more about rose painting, whether miniature or large scale, I've got plenty of rose painting tutorials in my flowers and foliage playlist. So now I'm going to just bring some of these rose patterns around the side here, and of course they're just slightly on an angle, so I'm just squishing the design just a little bit to make it look just a little bit like it is upturned on an angle. And then here we really don't see much of it at all, so I might just see the tiniest hint of pink. Then I have some yellow, cadmium yellow, where we're just going to create a little yellow flower here. And when you're painting in miniature, the beauty of it is you can use just a series of little brush strokes and a little bit of determination, and all of a sudden you've got a lovely flower. There are also some lovely little blue flowers just poking out. With little sort of trumpets almost. So I've just used some Cobalt Blue Deep. And done two little mirrored C curves to create that nice little bit of detail. And then I can also see some sort of sprigs of gold, so we will add in some of those as well. It's a very colourful set of china, this, I do like it. So we're just slowly building this pattern up. What I can't imagine is back in the day having hand painted every single one of these onto the cups themselves. That's amazing. And then some sap green to add in a few little leaves here and there. I must say this is inspired by, not a direct replica, because there is no chance I could do the amount of detail that features in these cups. And also this is a whole exercise in achieving detail through simple marks and brush strokes. We're going to let that dry and then we'll start putting in some lovely gold flourishes. To create gold detail on here, I am going to first paint it all in cadmium yellow, which seems like a really garish yellowy colour, but what we will do is, once we've got the cadmium yellow elements in, is we will be adding yellow ochre to knock it back and make it into a lovely regal gold colour. But for now I'm just sort of outlining the gold shapes that I've created in these details in pencil, leaving a little bit of unpainted space here and there, and then I will be allowing it a chance to dry, and then we will get our yellow ochre involved, because that is a fantastic rich colour to create a gold tone. So you can see that I am elaborating on the pencil line I did draw, because that's all you need really, is the simple line, because then you do most of the work with the brush. The other reason we like using cadmium yellow is because I am doing a tiny bit of layering, which could be a slight challenge on top of the turquoise, but cadmium yellow is quite an opaque watercolour paint. The word cadmium is what you want to look out for. That is a sign that your colour will be more opaque than a number of other watercolour colours. And I'm going to add in an extra flourish here, because I'm going to paint a bow in here. As I said, this is a super fancy cup. So I'm just going to go round all of my lines, adding in extra little flourishes and bits all in the cadmium yellow, and then once that's dried we'll get the yellow ochre. All the yellow's on, and now time for the yellow ochre. So I've got my 4/10 brush once again, and this time I am going to use the yellow ochre as a sort of highlight and low light tool. So I'm using this paint almost more like gouache, that I'm not really blending it in much. I'm just finding the low lights. We don't want to cover up too much of our yellow, but there will be places where we just want to get a real strength of that gold colour. And then we can have a bit of fun with details as well. The nice thing, a teacup is such a fun starting point, I think, for a design. There are so many different china patterns that I highly recommend, if you're inspired by this tutorial, is to go and have a look, maybe rummage in your cupboards, see what you've got, pop down a local charity shop, there's always something interesting in there, or a thrift store if you're in America. Or maybe your mum or your granny or someone in your family has a wonderful collection of china, and you can take one out to have a little practice on. The cup is really coming to life with that addition of the yellow ochre, and now just changing my water, and I'm going to add a few little lowlights and details to the flowers, because after that all that's left to do is a little bit of shadow, which is really going to bring the cup to life. So I've got some alizarin crimson here and my 4/10 brush once again, and I'm just going to use it to add a little bit more detail to the roses. And then some French ultramarine mixed in with the sap green to create a few little leaf lines. Make sure you've got all that colour off your brush by using the kitchen roll to blot it. And then lastly, a little bit of French ultramarine just for those little blue flowers. So before embarking on your shadow, it's very important to make sure that your cup is all dry in terms of painting. By the way, I'm not putting too much detail down on that little squashed bit of pattern, because that just helps us sort of not have the eye draw to it too much, because it is a bit squashed and a bit faded and we can't really see it too well. So that's a little watercolour trick. I'm just mixing up a blue and brown mix, just getting a little bit of an overlap with the cobalt blue, but that's no problem. Just trying to warm up that colour a fraction with a bit more of the brown. And we want to be really, really careful with going very delicately for the shadow. So we still haven't even painted in the handle, which is going to rely entirely on shadow, but also where the cup sort of sits on the saucer and how we get just the general roundness. I'm going to begin with my size 2 brush by I'm just going to tilt the page actually, so I'll move that up out the way. A bit more room, there we go. So you can see it's very, very faint watercolour. But just popping in that to begin with is really nice. And then just underneath the bowl of the cup. And so far I've not sort of disturbed too much of the pattern yet. Now I'm going to get a slightly smaller brush and begin to paint in some shadow on the handle. So painting the underside. I'm going to smooth it a little bit. And that should be all we need. Of course, when we rub out the pencil, we're likely to be left with nothing in place of this outline here. So I'm just painting a very faint line. And one there too, just to make sure we've got something. I'm going to continue with the small brush down here. Just sort of outlining, not necessarily outlining, but painting sort of on the outer edge of where the cup sits on the saucer, and then get a larger brush and just blend that outwards a little bit. Still not really touching the pattern just yet, but we're going to, and we've got to be okay with getting a little bit of a bleed of colour, because this is watercolour after all, and I like a bit of that to just get a bit of character going on. So you can see just the tiny bit of bleed just there and there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a large brush. I'm going to use a size, where are you, size 6. Really, really faint amount of colour again. And also, if you are worried about having too much colour on your brush, if you have a little bit of scrap paper to one side and you test it, you'll be able to see how light or dark it is, so you can get it exactly how you want it. I am now just going to sweep the brush one stroke, and that's it, and we leave it. We don't do any more than that, and that is just going to really help with the sense of the shine and also of the expressiveness of watercolour. And then one last thing is we would be just about able to see the underside of this saucer. So with my smallest brush, I'm just painting a shadowy curve. Just along the front. That helps with the sense of that lip of that saucer coming up. And there you have a lovely cup and saucer. So all we need to do now is let the paint dry 100%, especially for moments like this. We really don't want to disturb it too much. And then we can rub out the pencil and see what we're left with. So by rubbing that out with my kneadable eraser, I've just lifted it. I think losing the pencil, you just get the beautiful delicacy of the details here. And if you wanted, you could add a tiny bit more shadow. I just popped in a tiny bit more under those two nooks on the handle. But there you have a porcelain, bone china, whatever it is. It's bone china, not porcelain. A bone china cup and saucer inspired by the Royal Collection. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed that one, then hit the like button and let me know how you're getting on with it in the comments below. And of course, if you subscribe, then you'll never miss another video. Okay, until next time, bye!